In the aftermath of the Third Great Ninja War, Hiruzen had had enough. He'd seen the Leaf Village through 2 different wars. He was old, tired, and a shadow of his former self. He was loved and respected by all, and yet it was time for a change. This is when he finally decided to retire. He and Danzo met the feudal lord of the Land of Fire, and in the end, Minato became the 4th Hokage. And yet, history didn't have to play out that way. There were plenty of other candidates, other strong shinobi who could have led the village in this new age. We have Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade, the 3 Sannin. Besides them, we have Fugaku, head of the Uchiha clan, and Shikaku. Lastly, we even have Danzo, who was once passed over by Tobirama to become the 3rd Hokage. Let's start with Orochimaru, seeing as he was the closest to being appointed the 4th Hokage. The reason he was passed over by Hiruzen was simple. Orochimaru only really wanted power. That's what he saw the office of the Hokage as. Hiruzen realized it pretty quickly, but even then he still held out hope. But he eventually realized that Orochimaru couldn't be saved, and Hiruzen determined that he was unfit to be Hokage. Still, if Orochimaru had become Hokage, the Leaf Village would look a lot different. Even at this time, Orochimaru was conducting human experiments in the shadows, finding ways to gain more power. If he did become Hokage, I think we can assume he'd be a lot more bold. Maybe these experiments would eventually even become public knowledge. People would protest, but Orochimaru has always had the backing of Danzo, and I can see the rest of the village eventually accepting this, provided Orochimaru doesn't conduct any experiments with Hidden Leaf Ninja. All of these would probably be done under the banner of Root. Orochimaru had worked under Danzo, and he doubtless trusts his tools more than the normal Anbu for his missions. Orochimaru is also definitely getting the Sharingan he's always wanted in this timeline. It's really just a matter of whose body he'll steal. In this version of events, the Leaf Village would be far stronger than in the anime. All of the research Orochimaru would end up doing does bear fruit, primarily in the form of the curse marks. Imagine a world where most Leaf Shinobi can get a curse mark of their own, provided they're absolutely loyal to Orochimaru, of course. There are ninja in the village that would never go along with this, of course. Minato, Jiraiya, and Tsunade, for instance, probably would never be fine with Orochimaru's experiments. In this timeline, I imagine the Leaf Village would be split in half, with one side with and one side against the 4th Hokage. There are dozens of ways this could go from here. There's the possibility that this all either ends up leading to a civil war or a coup d'etat. Maybe we have something similar to the Uchiha massacre, with someone being sent out to exterminate everyone Orochimaru is suspicious of. Whether or not that would work is a different story altogether. Then there's the possibility that this tension would just end after Tobi's attack on the Leaf Village, with everyone uniting against a common enemy for the good of the village. It's impossible to say what road history would go down, but it would be a drastically different series if Orochimaru became the 4th Hokage. One thing would probably still happen. In the Nine-Tails attack, I don't see Orochimaru going out of his way to risk his neck. Presumably that would get in the way of discovering the secret of immortality. More than likely, Minato would still have to sacrifice himself even if he wasn't the Hokage. Now let's look at Jiraiya. Jiraiya actually was offered the office of Hokage, 3 times in fact. Each time he refused it himself. His reason was simple enough, he just isn't responsible enough to oversee an entire village by himself. Let's trust Jiraiya to know his own flaws here. Still, if he did end up becoming Hokage, what would happen? Surprisingly, I don't see this timeline being all that different from the Orochimaru timeline. Jiraiya isn't responsible, which would just let both Orochimaru and Danzo be much bolder with their own plans. Even if Jiraiya caught Orochimaru, I doubt he'd try to kill him. He'd try to change him, which I think we can all agree wouldn't work. Eventually, Orochimaru and Danzo would just be too strong. They'd have too many ninja on their side. Jiraiya would become little more than a puppet before he realized it. By the time he did, it would be too late. It's impossible to say what would happen from here, but another civil war seems pretty likely. Let me restate that the main thing preventing a Hokage Jiraiya from keeping Danzo and Orochimaru under control is that he would be unwilling to distrust the people close to him. Then we have the last of the Sannin, Tsunade. This really depends on whether or not Tsunade is able to shake off her PTSD and assume the role of Hokage, because that was what prevented her from accepting the role until she met Naruto. If she is able to get over the loss of Dan and Nawaki, I think Tsunade as the 4th Hokage would be the most similar to what actually happened in the story. She'd be the same strong, dependable leader she was throughout most of Naruto. Unlike Jiraiya, she'd definitely chase Orochimaru away sooner than later, and the series continues on the same way from there. Minato or Sarutobi would have to sacrifice themselves against the Nine Tails here too, seeing as that's not something Tsunade can really deal with. Tsunade might be bolder than Hiruzen, and might be sterner when the Uchiha uprising starts to happen, but I don't think she'd be able to stop Danzo from using Itachi to kill his clan. People underestimate how difficult that situation really was sometimes. Now, the Sand Village attack is an interesting one. If Orochimaru exploits Tsunade's emotional vulnerabilities by using his reanimation jutsu, I can see him killing or incapacitating her relatively effortlessly. If he doesn't, or if Tsunade somehow overcomes that, then I don't see her dying at all. People really underestimate her, but she is physically superior to the other Sannin, and with her creation rebirth, she is literally immortal for a time. She can't kill Orochimaru, but she would definitely last long enough for help to arrive. Orochimaru would run away, his arms intact. Then again, maybe either Minato or Sarutobi comes in to save the day, whichever is still alive. Either way, the series is still roughly similar to what we saw happen in the canon timeline if Tsunade accepts the role. If she can't, then in the worst case, she might actually be the first Kage we know of to abandon their village, which would be dramatic. Up next we have Fugaku. I think most people don't know this, but Fugaku is a very capable shinobi in his own right. He has the Mangekyo Sharingan, and he probably would have been a pretty big hurdle for Itachi if he had actually chosen to fight that night. We don't know what exactly his abilities are, but you don't get the name Wicked Eye if you're a nobody. It's impossible to say how he'd be as Hokage, we just don't know enough about him. For instance, Orochimaru. I doubt someone who'd organize a coup d'etat would deal too kindly with someone like Orochimaru and Danzo undermining him constantly. Would that lead to Orochimaru being exiled? Probably. Would Fugaku use his Sharingan Genjutsu to turn Orochimaru into a slave of the leaf? Well, that's the sort of thing we can only speculate about. We also wouldn't have the Uchiha massacre. The village elders would have no reason to suspect the Uchiha of trying to attack the village they run. The village would of course be much stronger for it. They still have their strongest clan, and people like Itachi and Shisui are both alive and well. I suspect this is the timeline where an eventual sand invasion would get absolutely annihilated, if it ever happens at all. Let's talk about Shikaku next, one of the smartest characters in the series. Shikaku is an interesting one. He isn't as strong as anyone else here, but he makes up for all of that through brains alone. If he became the Hokage, I'd be surprised if he didn't quickly figure out what Orochimaru's experiments were, or how Danzo was trying to secretly steal power from under his nose. I don't think this would result in a major fight or anything. Shikaku is too smart for that. Instead, he'd just slowly chip away from them like Tsunade was doing, until Danzo is little more than a figurehead. Orochimaru is probably smart enough to see the writing on the wall and run away on his own, if he hasn't been discovered by Hiruzen in this timeline. If there's anyone who can find a solution to the Uchiha's growing resentment to the Nine Tails attack, it's probably one of the smartest ninja ever. The Nara clan understands the value of information and when to share it, so I can imagine good diplomacy between Shikaku and Fugaku resolving a lot of problems. The Uchiha might make it out okay in this timeline, especially since it would be harder for Danzo going behind Shikaku's back instead of manipulating his old friend Hiruzen to blackmail Itachi. Since Orochimaru ended up running away like the main timeline, Shikaku might die during the Sand Invasion, but there would be many great candidates to replace him. All in all, the Leaf Village is exceptionally strong in this timeline. The worst thing that could happen is Orochimaru killing both Shikaku and Hiruzen due to the element of surprise during the Chunin exams. But if they still have some of the Uchiha clan left in the village, then Konoha doesn't have too much to worry about from Orochimaru or Sasuke down the road. Then finally, we have Danzo. Honestly, I don't think this timeline is too different from if Orochimaru became the 4th Hokage. They'd both probably rule in the same way. Root might end up replacing the regular Anbu, but I suspect Danzo would give Orochimaru his blessing to do whatever he feels like. It might go poorly for him if he did try to have Orochimaru killed just to tie up loose ends. The Nine Tails attack would go down the same way, with either Minato or Sarutobi sacrificing themselves with the Reaper Death Seal. The Uchiha massacre would happen the same way too. If, however, Minato is the one to deal with the Nine Tails, then things change. Naruto was more or less ignored in the canon timeline, but Danzo or even Orochimaru wouldn't ignore him. He would almost definitely be trained from birth to be a Jinchuriki weapon, just like Gaara. The Leaf Village would be a lot stronger in the short term, but Naruto wouldn't get any of the power boosts he gets later on. This timeline is also heading toward either a culling or an eventual civil war, and from there, it's impossible to say what would happen. With everyone's case laid out, who really would have made for the best 4th Hokage? In hindsight, I suppose Fugaku would have been the best fit, but that's only after we've seen the whole series. At the moment, I'd still give it to Minato. It's the aftermath of the Third Ninja War, and Konoha has to be strong. Who better to give off strength and authority than the man who took down an army by himself? The man you don't fight on the battlefield, the man you run away from if you lay eyes on him. Minato, with his flying thunder god, is probably also the only Hokage who could be everywhere in the village all at once, providing an assurance of safety to everyone. Then, out of everyone listed here, Minato is the strongest despite his young age. Minato hasn't even peaked in strength yet, and he's basically a war-ending weapon. Who better can you have? The fact that he's betrothed to the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki is his only vulnerability, and that can almost be called a strength if it didn't become his downfall. Even in every other timeline, it's probably going to be Minato dealing with the Nine-Tails. He is, at the very least, the only reason the Leaf Village doesn't get instantly wiped out from a stray tailed beast bomb. He's also the only one who can actually make Toby back off, aside from maybe Fugaku. All in all, Minato is the best logical choice for the 4th Hokage, even if his legacy got cut short. I think Minato was supposed to be the child of prophecy, and might have even been able to solve the Uchiha massacre. He knows the Uchiha culprit thereafter is Madara. Besides, would they even dare plan a coup knowing Minato is Hokage? Minato also wouldn't let Danzo scheme nearly as much as he does under Hiruzen. He definitely trained Naruto to be a lot stronger, so Naruto's impressive talents would get polished much earlier, even if he never ends up becoming the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. Honestly, it's strange. Under Minato, the Leaf Village was heading for a golden age unlike any it had seen in decades before fate cut it short. Despite the unlucky end, there was simply no one better than Minato to be the 4th Hokage. But that's only because Sakumo was already dead. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe, share the video with someone who will like it, and turn on that notification bell. Before I go, I just want to give an extra special shout out to all of the incredible patrons over at patreon.com/KatoYT. We're super active in our patron Discord server, occasionally throwing some late night anime and movie watch parties. So if that's something you're interested in, pledge just a single $1 to get an invite. You can also follow us on Twitter at KatoBeyond. Links to everything will be in the description. Again, my name is Zero, this is Kato, and thank you very much for listening to my dumb rants. Subscribe for more.